a new segment that we wanted to introduce starting this episode, and we're going to do it every episode after talking about Raw or our pay-per-views. We wanted to, dip into our mailbag. So,
Yep.
The first piece of mail today comes from JB out in LA.
What's up, JB?
What up, JB? Thanks for listening. Appreciate the support. His question, comment, and request for a topic is wrestling making a mainstream comeback? Great question. Great topic. I think we'll have a lot of fun discussing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you start on this. So is wrestling making a mainstream comeback?
I believe so. When they were covering SummerSlam on ESPN.
Yes.
And does that ever... I don't think they even do that for WrestleMania.
No. One point that I was thinking of, too, is back in the day when Hulk Hogan was fighting and, they would do WrestleManias.
Yeah.
They would stop ESPN programming, or how they would show the scores on ESPN.
Yeah.
They would actually show, in today's WWF news, Hulk Hogan won the World Heavyweight title from Andre the Giant, whatever. They would do
cool.
like a little thing, like it was a score, and then, go about their way. But now they try to separate, or it seems to me that they try to separate pro wrestling with actual sports because it's entertainment, not so much a sport. There was this might be a little bit off topic, but I kind of just wanted to mention this and maybe see what you thought.
Sure.
Dana White went on, I guess, Twitter, talking to a fan, doing a reply to a fan, and basically calling WWE fake.
Yeah, I heard about that. I don't know exactly what it was, but
I don't know. They were talking about programming. If I remember correctly, this fan on Twitter was basically saying, hey, Dana White, WWE pay-per-views or whatever, $9.99. I get a pay-per-view every month, this and that. Why are you so expensive?
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
If it was a joke or whatever.
It's actually a legit question.
And then, of course, Dana White comes back and says, hey, that's what you pay for the fake stuff. I'm not quoting.
Okay.
I don't know the exact, but if I remember correctly, this was kind of like the gist of what I read. So there's been going on, you have some wrestlers like Mick Foley, some wrestlers like Stone Cold coming back and talking about the whole fake remark. I don't know. I mean, you could see it from both standpoints.
Yeah, I was like, I guess that's kind of fair.
Yeah. It's not, well, when wrestlers come back very angrily and say this isn't fake, they usually bring it up with, this isn't fake because I was injured, or this isn't fake because I have the bumps and bruises to prove it, or
Yeah.
Fake, and I'm not putting any words in Dana White's mouth, but fake, yes, because it's a storyline. Who's going to win,
yeah.
Who's not going, who's going to lose. It's scripted. Fake as in, these guys putting their bodies at risk day in, day out. No,
absolutely not.
hell no. So it depends on how you want to take it. Obviously, Dana White kind of, retracted a little bit and tried to explain himself, but it was already out in the open. So, yeah, I just wanted to kind of, throw that at you. But we're talking about mainstream comebacks. So, there hasn't been a lot of wrestling talk, on media in the past few years, or, the past 15, 20 years. But with the streak of The Undertaker.
Oh, yeah.
I
remember that was even news.
Such a big deal. They made it a big deal even on media sites when he lost to Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
It's, wow, 21 and 0, and then he loses, and, you bring that up. You got to talk about, things like John Cena being on Good Morning America so many times. He did his 500th Make-A-Wish on Good Morning America.
He's, like, in the spotlight. People know who he is.
Yeah.
He's in movies too now.
Yeah, and Trainwrecked. Uh-huh. He was in a Nickelodeon kid movie called,
really?
I think, Fred.
I've never seen that.
Yeah,
I never even heard of that. I gotta
my kids watched the program. It was this kid called Fred. He was a YouTube guy, YouTube sensation, I guess if you want to call him.
Okay.
Made a movie, ended up I think on Nickelodeon. John Cena played his dad. It was pretty funny. John Cena's actually a pretty funny actor.
Cena's funny. Yeah. I remember watching, I believe it was Parks and Rec, and he was a guest, and I got so excited when he came out.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, John Cena.
Yeah, because, it mixes, it starts to mix in, our lives as wrestling fans
and
media which is what everybody is. So it's like, oh, I know who that is. Now everybody else is going to know who that is. The Rock is an extreme situation.
Yeah.
There's nobody like The Rock. Even Hogan was never like The Rock.
Yeah, dude, The Rock is totally different. Like, he's one of a kind that came out of WWE and became such a big superstar outside of it.
Do you think The Rock had a little, to do with the fact that WWE and wrestling became more mainstream because of how he, was a wrestler first, but then started making big movies? I mean, not just these mediocre movies that you see all these other WWE stars in, but these are huge box office movies. Do you think he had a lot to do with it?
Yeah, he definitely did have something to do with it, because he was a movie star for a while. He could have just went away and been happy, but he came back and main evented WrestleMania with John Cena.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course, like, people that were fans of The Rock were like, oh, yeah, I'm going to watch wrestling and check this out. And him being such a big presence in, like, the media, people are going to, document what he does. And if it's bring WWE, like, to the spotlight, like, oh, Rock's going to be here, like,
well, and
he's doing something.
The cool thing is, like, he was a wrestler, then he goes out and does all these movies, comes back to wrestling. Of course, you're going to bring fans of his for his movies to watch a couple programs. Oh, The Rock's going to be on this show called Raw? All right, let me check it out.
Yeah.
If either you're hooked or you're not, but at least the programming was there. It's like, okay, this is cool. I could see The Rock once a week, once every other week. I could see him at WrestleMania. Oh, I love The Rock. I'll spend, $60 or whatever WrestleMania was at the time, or $9.99 on WWE Network. It's one of those things where I think he brought so much exposure to the wrestling world that it at least had to hook some people,
Yeah.
So I think it was.
But is he the reason it's? I don't think. Are we even asking or even answering the question if like, hey, is wrestling in the spotlight?
Well, our topic was, is wrestling making a mainstream comeback? So you can take it. You can kind of take it any way that you want to. By comeback, I think in the 80s, maybe even the 90s, you like I said, you had the Hulk Hogan's, you had stuff like that being on ESPN. Hulk Hogan was huge with Hulkamania.
Yeah.
And then it kind of died down, even when The Rock is in earlier years, you still had The Undertaker, Triple H, Stone Cold.
Yeah, but then that was just, wrestling was separate.
Yeah, wrestling was within the wrestling community. Mm-hmm. But now you have, again, John Cena on Good Morning America. Brock Lesnar actually took over the Sports Center, the ESPN
Yeah, that was
security
another thing.
Checkpoint. Like one day, they brought in Brock Lesnar for an interview. They decided to put him in the security booth.
Yeah.
And then they're taping these guys come in. They're like, oh, shit, you're Brock Lesnar. But they know who it is because, again, Brock Lesnar was a wrestler and he went to UFC, got more exposure because UFC has that MMA crowd.
Yeah.
Now you brought them back into WWE programming. So that had I'm not sitting here and saying that Rock did everything, but now you have these wrestlers, The Rock, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, bringing them from every angle.
And another thing about, like, even recently, Jon Stewart. Like, apparently he's been a wrestling fan his whole life, but then he's been posting that show, The Daily Show, for like 17 years, and he never made one mention of it, I think. And then, like, he had Seth Rollins on there and all that, and he's a big person in the media, and then when he did that he hit John Cena with the chair at SummerSlam, that became part of the news.
Because he was part of the storyline. He just wasn't a host. We've had a lot of hosts that hosted Raw and whatever, and they kind of go away, but Jon Stewart made a couple appearances, talked on Raw, and then became the host of SummerSlam and did that whole thing with John Cena. Came out the next day, got an AA for his trouble. So you have these guys who don't need to do that in big media presence. They're putting their life, career, whatever you want on the line, to get a finishing move from a huge wrestler. So that's big. Another thing that I was thinking about too is for ESPN, you have a lot of former WWE announcers. You have Todd Grisham. You have the coach, Jonathan Coachman, moving from announcing of WWE programming. So you're an announcer.
I forgot about him.
Host. But now you're an anchor on a worldwide watched news program.
Yeah, the top
24 hours a day.
Like sports.
Yeah, top
thing.
Sports. You know, and they had Jonathan Coachman come over during the whole SummerSlam thing and interview and get access for ESPN.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me to answer this question, JB, is wrestling making a mainstream comeback? I believe so. And I think it's going to be bigger than what it was a long time ago.
Oh, man. I guess I'll say it's making a mainstream comeback. Is it going to be bigger than it was? I don't know. I don't see, because Hulkamania was so huge and he was in the news like they're treating it like it was, you know, a real sport.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you know, it is.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. It's like, you know, is it or is it not a real sport? But the fact that even ESPN took the time to have a full day of SummerSlam events, it's going in the right direction as far as being more mainstream. And I think it's good for the business. It's obviously good whenever you can get exposure on media sites, news sites, anything that's not WWE or wrestling sites. It's a good thing. You know, they appeared on like Yahoo, they appeared on, you know, CNN, they appeared on all these news
there was this period where wrestling was just exclusive to the wrestling community, but now it's bigger. So I'm gonna go with it'll.
Yeah.
So that answers your question, JB.
All right. Well, thanks again, JB, for writing in. So every week we're going to take one fan mail from our fun mailbag and talk about the topic. So, you know, shootsessions@gmail.com. Send us your comments, send us your feedback, but send us topics to talk about. What we'll do is we'll take the topic, Doza and I will discuss it, and hopefully get you some answers on how we feel about certain things. So,
yep.
you know, go ahead and do that.